Ever wondered what lurked in medieval forests? Did people fear the woods or depend on them for survival? Number 6. The shadowy realm of outlaws and bandits. What's scarier than being robbed in broad daylight? Being ambushed in the depths of a dark, secluded forest with nowhere to run and no one to hear your cries. Medieval forests weren't just home to wild animals and mystical creatures. They were the perfect hideout for outlaws, bandits, and anyone looking to escape the long arm of the law. The dense canopy and winding paths provided the perfect cover for those who lived outside society's boundaries. Remember the tales of Robin Hood and his merry men. They weren't just fictional characters made up to entertain children. They were based on the very real phenomenon of forest outlaws. These weren't always noble thieves stealing from the rich to give to the poor. Most were dangerous men who would think nothing of slitting your throat for a few coins. Outlaws chose forests for practical reasons. The thick vegetation made it nearly impossible for authorities to track them down. They knew the hidden paths, secret caves, and dense thickets where they could disappear in seconds if pursued. For travelers, this meant journeying through forests was a risky proposition. Merchant caravans would often hire armed guards specifically for forest passages, knowing the danger that awaited them. Some forests became so notorious for bandit activity that people would travel miles out of their way to avoid them. The Forest of Dean in England and parts of Sherwood Forest were known danger zones where only the brave or foolish would venture alone. But here's the twist: some of these forest outlaws became folk heroes. When corrupt officials and greedy nobles squeezed common folk for every penny, outlaws who targeted the wealthy sometimes gained popular support. Ballads were sung about their exploits, and tales of their daring robberies spread from village to village. For medieval authorities, forests represented a frustrating gap in their control. A criminal could commit crimes in town, then vanish into the greenwood where pursuing them was nearly impossible. This led to harsh penalties for forest crimes, to discourage people from thinking the outlaw life was worth the risk. Number 5. The medieval pharmacy, medicine and magic from the woods. Did you know the difference between life and death often grew on forest floors? How many lives were saved by plants picked under the light of a full moon? Long before modern medicine, medieval forests were natural pharmacies. People relied heavily on the plants, fungi, and other resources found within woodland areas for healing and medicinal purposes. Herbalists, wise women, and monastery infirmarians would venture into forests to collect everything from willow bark containing salicin, similar to modern aspirin for pain relief, to foxglove containing digitalis used for heart conditions. The forest floor yielded mosses used as natural antibiotics and fungi with various medicinal properties. St. John's wort, which still has a reputation for treating depression today, was gathered from forest clearings. Valerian root, used as a sedative, grew in woodland margins. Even common trees like oak provided medicinal remedies. Oak bark was boiled to create astringents for treating diarrhea and infections. These forest remedies weren't just folk medicine, they formed the backbone of medieval healthcare. Monasteries, which often served as the hospitals of their day, maintained extensive herb gardens but relied on wild, gathered forest plants for many of their most potent medicines. Monks would venture into nearby woodlands regularly to replenish their supplies. But the line between medicine and magic was blurry in medieval times. Many believed certain plants needed to be gathered at specific times, under particular phases of the moon, or on significant days of the year, to have their full potency. Some herbs were thought to work better if collected while reciting specific prayers or charms. This meant forests weren't just seen as sources of physical medicine, but also places of spiritual and magical power. The person who knew which forest plants could heal and how to prepare them held tremendous value in medieval society. However, this knowledge could be dangerous to possess. As Christianity spread and consolidated its power, those with extensive knowledge of forest plants, particularly women, sometimes found themselves accused of witchcraft. The same knowledge that could heal a sick child or ease a painful death might also lead to persecution. Despite these risks, the tradition of forest medicine continued throughout the medieval period. Many modern pharmaceuticals have their origins in compounds first identified and used by medieval forest foragers. When we take aspirin today, we're benefiting from knowledge that once sent people searching through the undergrowth of ancient woodlands. Number 4. Hunger's haven, food from the foliage. Could a forest feed an entire village during famine? How did the poorest survive when crops failed? When we think of medieval food sources, we often picture cultivated fields and domesticated animals. But forests provided a crucial food supply that could mean the difference between starvation and survival, especially for the poorest members of society. Foraging in medieval forests yielded a remarkable variety of edibles. Nuts were particularly important. Acorns, hazelnuts, chestnuts, and walnuts provided calorie-dense foods that could be stored through winter. While acorns required processing to remove bitter tannins, they could be ground into flour for bread during desperate times. Berries and fruits grew in abundance: blackberries, wild strawberries, crab apples, sloes, elderberries, and more. These weren't just treats, they provided essential vitamins when fresh vegetables were scarce. Mushrooms offered protein and nutrients, though gathering them required expert knowledge to avoid poisonous varieties. Even the forest trees themselves provided food. The inner bark of certain trees could be dried and ground into emergency flour. Pine needles could be brewed into tea rich in vitamin C. Young leaves of trees like beech and linden were eaten as spring grains. Honey from wild bees' nests was the primary sweetener in medieval times, making honey hunting in forests a valuable skill. Finding a productive bee tree could provide enough honey to sweeten food for months and produce mead, an alcoholic beverage made from fermented honey. Hunting in the forest provided crucial protein. While hunting rights were strictly controlled, as we'll discuss later, poaching was common. Small game like rabbits, squirrels, and birds could be snared with simple traps. Evidence from medieval middens, trash heaps, shows that even protected game like deer and wild boar were sometimes illegally hunted by commoners desperate for meat. During famine years, when crops failed in the fields, forests became life-saving food reserves. While forest foods might not be as calorie efficient as cultivated grains, they were more reliable in the face of drought or flooding that might destroy field crops. Monasteries and large estates often maintained detailed records of which forest areas yielded the best harvests of different foods. Certain trees would be marked and remembered for their productivity. Children would learn from an early age which plants were edible and where to find them. This knowledge wasn't just practical, it was deeply cultural. Traditional dishes using forest ingredients were passed down through generations. Festivals and celebrations often coincided with the seasonal availability of certain forest foods. The relationship between people and the edible forest was intimate and essential. Number 3. The building blocks of medieval life. What built the homes, warmed the hearths, and crafted the tools of everyday medieval life? How did a living forest transform into everything from mighty ships to humble spoons? Forests were medieval hardware stores, construction sites, and energy sources all rolled into one. Wood wasn't just one resource among many, it was the essential material that made medieval life possible. Construction relied almost entirely on timber. From humble peasant cottages to grand medieval halls, wood formed the framework of nearly every building. Oak was prized for its strength and durability in main structural elements. Elm was often used for floorboards. Pine and spruce made excellent roof timbers. Even stone castles needed enormous amounts of wood for scaffolding, floors, roofs, and interior structures. The medieval shipbuilding industry consumed forests at an astounding rate. A single large ship might require 0 to 30 trees. The curved parts of ships needed specially shaped trees, and shipwrights would identify and sometimes even cultivate trees with the right natural bends. As maritime nations like England expanded their fleets, entire forests disappeared into their navies. Beyond buildings and ships, everyday objects relied on woodland materials. Furniture, wagons, plows, barrels, buckets, dishes, tools, nearly everything in medieval life contained wood. Different woods served different purposes: ash for tool handles because of its shock resistance, yew for longbows because of its combination of flexibility and strength, willow for baskets because of its pliable wands. Forests provided more than just wood. The bark of certain trees, particularly oak, contained tannins used in leather tanning. Without this forest product, there would be no durable leather for shoes, belts, harnesses, and armor. Birch bark could be used as emergency writing material when parchment wasn't available and made excellent kindling for starting fires. But perhaps the most crucial forest product was the simplest: firewood. In an era before fossil fuels, wood was the primary heating and cooking fuel. A family might burn 10 to 20 cords of wood annually just to stay warm and cook food. Charcoal, produced by partially burning wood in low oxygen environments, provided the high temperatures needed for metalworking. Without charcoal from forests, there would be no iron tools, weapons, or armor. This intensive demand for wood led to sophisticated forest management practices. Coppicing, cutting trees near the ground to encourage multiple new stems to grow from the stump, allowed for sustainable harvesting of smaller wood. Pollarding, cutting trees higher up to produce branches out of reach of browsing animals, was another common practice. These management techniques could make a forest productive indefinitely. The value of forest products created specialized professions. Charcoal burners lived in the woods, tending their smoldering mounds. Woodcutters developed expertise in felling trees without damaging the valuable timber. Coopers crafted watertight barrels essential for storing everything from beer to pickled foods, and carpenters became masters of joining wood without modern fasteners. Number 2. Laws of the land, forest as royal playground. Who owned the forest? Could a hungry peasant hunt a deer without risking death? Why would kings value trees more than people? Medieval forests weren't free for all zones where anyone could take what they needed. Instead, they were highly regulated spaces with complex laws that often favored the powerful at the expense of common people. In many European countries, particularly England after the Norman conquest, extensive areas of forest came under direct royal control. William the Conqueror and his successors declared vast territories as royal forests, subject to special forest law that existed alongside common law. These royal forests weren't necessarily completely wooded. They often included villages, fields, and open land. What made them forests in the legal sense was their subjection to forest law, which primarily protected game animals for royal hunting pleasure. Deer were especially protected. Killing a deer in a royal forest could result in severe punishment, blinding, mutilation, or even execution in extreme cases. Even carrying bow and arrows in a royal forest could be suspicious enough to warrant arrest. Dogs kept by commoners living near royal forests often had their front paws mutilated, a process called lawing, to prevent them from chasing deer. These harsh protections existed because medieval hunting wasn't just about food, it was about power, prestige, and preparing for war. Kings and nobles viewed hunting as a martial exercise that kept them sharp for battle. Elaborate hunts were social events that reinforced hierarchies and provided opportunities for political maneuvering away from court. Forest law created specialized courts and officials. Verderers judged forest offenses, foresters patrolled the woods looking for violators, and elaborate surveys called regards documented the state of royal forests. These systems created opportunities for corruption, with forest officials often extorting payments from local communities. The restrictions of forest law caused tremendous hardship for commoners living near royal forests. They might see deer destroying their crops but be unable to drive them away for fear of being accused of disturbing the king's game. They might need wood for cooking or repairs but face heavy fines for taking it without permission. This tension between royal forest privileges and common people's needs occasionally erupted into conflict. The Charter of the Forest, issued in 1217 as a companion to the Magna Carta, addressed some of these grievances by rolling back the most extreme aspects of forest law and restoring certain traditional rights of access. Beyond royal forests, other woodlands had their own complex systems of rights and access. Manor forests might be subject to common rights where local people could gather firewood, graze pigs, or collect forest products under specific conditions. Monasteries controlled extensive woodlands, managing them for both economic productivity and the solitude needed for spiritual contemplation. These medieval forest laws left lasting impacts on landscapes and law. Even today, remaining fragments of ancient royal hunting grounds like the New Forest in England maintain special legal status. The tensions between exclusive aristocratic privileges and common access rights that played out in medieval forests continue to influence modern debates about land access and resources. Number 1. Between two worlds, forests as places of spiritual power and terror. Could demons hide behind every tree? Did fairies dance in moonlit clearings? Why did medieval people both fear and revere the deep woods? Medieval forests occupied an ambiguous space in the imagination, neither fully wild nor tamed. They existed as borderlands between the orderly human world and the chaotic unknown. This made them powerful sites for spiritual experiences, both Christian and otherwise. Christian monastics frequently established their communities in or near forests. The wilderness setting recalled biblical traditions of retreat and contemplation, from Jesus' 40 days in the desert to the early desert fathers of Christianity. Saint Benedict, Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, and many other influential religious figures established monasteries where forests provided both practical resources and spiritual isolation. Many Christian hermits deliberately sought out the deepest, most remote parts of forests for their retreats. The solitude and removal from human society were seen as aids to prayer and communion with God. Some of these hermits gained reputations for holiness, attracting pilgrims who would journey into the forests to seek their wisdom and blessings. But alongside these Christian associations, forests retained powerful connections to older beliefs. Folk traditions throughout Europe associated specific trees with supernatural qualities. The oak, associated with thunder gods in pre-Christian traditions, remained a powerful symbol. Ash trees were linked to healing, elder trees to protection and magic, and yew trees to death and immortality due to their extreme longevity. Certain forest locations were considered liminal spaces where the boundary between the human world and the supernatural world grew thin. Clearings, unusual rock formations, ancient trees with distinctive shapes, and forest pools were all potential sites for encounters with beings from beyond the ordinary world. These supernatural forest inhabitants could be benevolent or malevolent. Helpful spirits might lead lost travelers home or reveal the location of medicinal plants. But malicious entities could lead wanderers astray, steal children, cause illness, or worse. Folk tales from across medieval Europe are filled with stories of encounters with forest beings, fairies, dwarves, wild men, shapeshifters, and more. Even as Christianity became the dominant religion, forests remained places where older beliefs persisted. Offerings might still be left at certain trees, springs, or stones. Rituals connected to forest spirits might be continued, sometimes with a thin veneer of Christian justification overlaid on practices with much older origins. Church authorities often struggled against these persistent forest-centered beliefs. Missionaries would establish churches at important forest sacred sites, absorbing rather than eliminating their spiritual significance. Saints' lives were sometimes created or modified to include stories of them defeating forest demons or sprites, demonstrating the superiority of Christian power over woodland spirits. The dual nature of forests as both places of Christian retreat and potential homes of supernatural beings created a complex relationship between medieval people and wooded landscapes. A forest could be a place to encounter God through solitude and contemplation, or a dangerous realm where unwary travelers might be led astray by demonic forces. This ambiguity appears constantly in medieval literature. In Arthurian legends, knights enter forests where they face both spiritual trials and supernatural encounters. Dante's Divine Comedy begins with the poet in the middle of our life's journey finding himself in a dark wood where the straight way was lost, using the forest as a powerful metaphor for spiritual confusion. For ordinary medieval people, this spiritual dimension added another layer to their everyday interactions with forests. A woodcutter might make the sign of the cross before felling a tree, not just as general piety, but as specific protection against spirits that might inhabit it. Gathering herbs might be accompanied by prayers or charms. Entering the forest might involve small rituals of protection. Have we lost something profound in our relationship with forests? Could the ancient trees still whisper secrets if only we knew how to listen?